watch how so many things state-run are handled, you just wonder sometimes. You just wonder. So often you hear people propose, and sometimes it's extreme, but you hear the idea they talk about. You could go and take a tanty who run in a village parlor in the back somewhere and put her in some of those positions, and they would run it better. And that's a bit of hyperbole. It might, chances are it wouldn't actually work out that well, but sometimes the simple, straightforward things, you really can't understand how it doesn't work that way. And then, if the simple, straightforward things are so difficult, what do we really expect when it gets to the complex things? Like figuring out how, yes, it could be better. Like figuring out how to cross vehicles across swampland. That's a pretty difficult thing to figure out. And it seems like it's too difficult for us as a country to figure out, because Mosquito Creek is giving us some licks. When I say us, I mean the government, because they represent us. It's giving us some licks, Mosquito Creek. And several people are coming out, and you could see the political underpinnings of some of what is being said. You could see the political underpinnings, but just because there are rightly political underpinnings doesn't mean automatically that the point they are making can be thrown out without looking carefully at it. Because maybe, although they are being political and making political points, they may be right. Fish spawning grounds in danger after collapse of highway at Mosquito Creek. The collapse of the South Trunk Road at Mosquito Creek has led to the loss of millions of taxpayers' dollars. But this is not the only fallout, as valuable fish spawning grounds are now in danger. Bordering the edge of the Oropouche Swamp and running parallel to the western coasts of the Gulf of Paria, the road upgrade was expected to solve the perennial flooding experienced by commuters for decades. As part of the Solomon Hochoy Highway Extension Project, this part of the highway, dubbed Package 5A, required the most technical engineering and cost taxpayers more than $280 million. But almost 3 years after the first 2 kilometers lanes were opened, the newly constructed highway is now falling apart. Under the Kamla Prasad Bissasa's People's Partnership Administration, a causeway, which is a raised road or track across the low or wet ground, was proposed to safeguard the wetlands. But this idea was shelved as it was deemed too expensive and would require another certificate of environmental clearance. All right, someone from the movement that is right now kind of opposing what they're doing, speaking to the Guardian media, president of the South Oropouche Riverine Flood Action Group, Edward Moody, said the causeway would have been aesthetically pleasing and would have safeguarded plant and marine life. I disagree with that. The causeway idea, where you build that, you know what they're talking about, those lifted roads that would be that where the commuters would be able to move above the ground. It's not that you have to build a foundation into the ground. Very likely you'd be on some kind of posts or stanchions or something of the like, and you'd be moving over ground. That was the initial idea under the People's Partnership, and this government found that was too expensive, so they changed it. Now, personally, to me, if it's too expensive in terms of relative to what causeways are supposed to cost on the global market, then we have a problem. Then that's a corruption problem. But if you're saying that that you're finding it too expensive to do something that would actually be the ideal thing in that situation, then I fully disagree. I think as a country, if we're building infrastructure, then we should build the most ideal infrastructure for whatever position we're placing that infrastructure in, regardless of the cost. That's my opinion. I think we should be building the most ideal. It makes no sense to me that we build a stopgap measure. We build something that would work in the meantime, and then afterwards you still have to go and build the final thing afterwards. I don't find that makes sense. I don't agree that you change it because the causeway in itself is too expensive. If the people were overcharging us, then you get people who don't overcharge us, and okay, fine. But if a causeway is the ideal thing, and from my understanding of that area, you have a swamp on one side, you have the ocean on the other side, and it's basically supposed to be able to filter out. That's what the swamp is. The swamps and those kind of wetlands are extremely important to our entire ecological cycle in our island. They are where fishes spawn, they are where fishes breed, they help to give that buffer between fresh and salt water. You get the brackish water there, which has its own unique properties, etc., etc., etc. I'm supposed to remember what they call that point right between the meeting of two major biospheres, and a lot of swamps represent that. So you really don't want to be tampering negatively with this. So maybe a causeway would have actually been the ideal thing, where you're driving over everything, and what has to happen naturally continues happening naturally underneath everything. That kind of makes sense to me. The guy, Mr. Moody, went on to say, I was a consultant at NIDCO, the National Infrastructure Development Company Limited, and they abandoned the idea of a causeway because, listen why they abandoned that idea. Because it would have meant going back to the EMA for a CEC, and they were afraid of Wayne Kublal Singh. Moody said. Yes, but that's what Mr. Moody said. He said the main reason they didn't go back to the causeway idea was because they were afraid of Mr. Kublal Singh. Now, here's the irony upon ironies of this. On Mr. Kublal Singh's part, if all of this is true, obviously this is conditional. If all of this is true, then here's the irony above ironies for Mr. Kublal Singh there. He is an environmentalist. He's an environmental activist. He wants what is best for the ecosystem and for the environment. But due to his protest action, the government was too afraid to go back and go through the process again, so they went with the option that was actually worse off. That was actually worse off for the environment. Imagine that. The irony is the environmental activist, through his activism, caused them to be unable to go back to actually do it the correct way. Imagine that. Consultant at the project under both the UNC and the PNM was American multinational engineering firm AECOM, which boasts 100 years of engineering experience on its website. Halcro Limited was also part of the engineering and designs, while Jusamco Pavers Limited were the contractors executing the project according to the specified designs. The thing with this is, this is the thing when people talk about listening to the experts. Think of the experts as the piper. From the proverbial statement, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Now, I am the one who is paying the piper. I may not know anything about how to play that pipe and make it make a tune. I have no idea. I am not the expert. You are the expert. You are the one who knows how to play that pipe. But I am the one who pays you, and I tell you what song I want to hear. The experts who designed this, very likely what would have happened is when the government came to them, the causeway was the initial idea, because they were the same people who were there with the previous government also. So they would have been there, they would have been the ones who designed the causeway too, very likely. And that may have been their ideal idea that they gave. The perfect thing for this situation is a causeway. But when the government comes in and they say, well, we don't want to pay that much money for a causeway. We want to make it look like we did it for half the price. And we want to make sure that we do it in half the time. It would make us look a lot better. And the engineers say, well, it's all you're paying for it. And that is not really the ideal thing, but we will see what we could do. And that's the entire problem with the experts there. Experts aren't independent on their own out there. One of the problem with especially the highest level of experts, when you go up, right up the ladder and learn everything that can be learned, one of the real problems becomes monetizing that. It becomes much more difficult to monetize all that effort you put into learning all of this extra stuff. So generally, you're dependent on someone funding your research or something of the sort. And who does that? Governments or big private companies. And if they're funding it, well, he who pays the piper, as I said, calls the tune. And I think this very thing could be an example of that. You look around and you could see that yes, there were experts involved in engineering this. This wasn't done by just some mason hired at the side of the road. These were international experts with over 100 years in experience. But if they were asked to create something that just wasn't ideal for the area, expert as they are limited but by what they are requested to do. So pay attention to that. Next time you hear obey the experts, that would be an interesting thing to bear in mind.